So we're now going to have a panel discussion on regional activities in quantum information, and I'd like to start by introducing the moderator for this morning's panel, Jonathan Felbinger. Jonathan is the Deputy Director of the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, QED-C. He's also born and raised in Chicago, so he's local. Jonathan has had a career spanning academia, industry, and government. Prior to joining QED-C, he worked with the U.S. Government Accountability Office, where he led studies and managed technological aspects of reports to Congress. He was a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow, and he's dedicated to furthering the development and adoption of quantum and related emerging technologies for national and societal benefits. Please, Jonathan.
Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. QEDC is an industry-driven consortium with the mission to enable and grow a robust quantum industry and the associated supply chain. So to accomplish this, our members come together from across the quantum ecosystem to identify and explore use cases of quantum technologies and to identify and address gaps in the enabling technologies, the supply chain, standardization, workforce, and issues of law and policy. QEDC sponsors an annual survey of the quantum computing marketplace in particular, and last year's results reflected continued growth with an estimated growth rate in excess of 20%. Now, we recognize that there are broader economic headwinds this year, and Hyperion Research will be releasing the latest results, which I haven't previewed yet, next month at the Q2B conference. But meanwhile, when we're thinking about the state of the quantum industry, we can look to other indicators. For example, hiring. Hiring in the quantum industry appears to remain robust. QEDC publishes a data set of available quantum jobs, and although we see some prominent tech companies that have announced institute-wide hiring freezes, we see other companies in the quantum ecosystem appear to be staying the course, with some taking the opportunity to hire more aggressively. The quantum industry remains at a relatively early stage of development, with significant promise of new capabilities across a range of applications. But at the relatively early stage of commercialization, the industry collectively faces a variety of engineering, business, and societal challenges. Most of these challenges are larger than any one institute could alone address. For example, QEDC has published a survey on workforce needs in the industry. And we find that the demand for the skilled and quantum-aware professionals is much larger than any one institution or university could possibly address. So QEDC also supports efforts toward the first quantum industry-wide roadmap activity. And the underlying challenges here really call for a collaborative and pre-competitive approach, with businesses coming together around the research, product development, component suppliers across service providers, and the end users to address these challenges. And some of these strong examples of such networks of collaboration within the industry, with particular focus on regional innovation that immediately come to mind, are in the Netherlands and, of course, right here in Chicago, around the catalyst of the Chicago Quantum Exchange. So I want to thank our partners here at the Chicago Quantum Exchange for this invitation, and to our panelists who are poised to share their perspectives and insights. From your left to right, I'd like to introduce first Paul Alivisatos, who is president of the University of Chicago and John D. MacArthur Distinguished Service Professor in the Department of Chemistry. As a preeminent scientist and entrepreneur, his pioneering research in nanomaterials has demonstrated key applications of nanocrystals in biomedical imaging and renewable energy. Paul was previously the executive vice chancellor and provost of University of California, Berkeley, where he held numerous positions, including director of the DOE Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory and founding director of the Cavalli Energy Nanoscience Institute. Paul received his bachelor's in chemistry from the University of Chicago and his doctorate in chemistry from Berkeley. Next, we have Supratik Guha, who is a senior scientist and advisor at Argonne, where in addition to his own research, he helps to develop Argonne's strategy for future information processing technology, including quantum information and microelectronics. Supratik serves as the CTO of QNext, the Argonne-led Department of Energy National Quantum Institute. As someone who has spent his career in industry, academia, and national laboratories, he works on taking basic science developments and turning them into practical technologies. Next, I'd like to welcome Robert Jones, who is Chancellor of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and is an accomplished scientist and research university leader. He serves as Chancellor of the state's flagship land-grant university and is Vice President of the University of Illinois System. The University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign is home to the IQUIST program, which is developing quantum computing, simulation, and sensing capabilities across an interdisciplinary center. And last, I'd like to introduce Leah Merminga, who is the director of Fermilab, where she sets the overall scientific strategy, represents the lab as an ambassador for US particle physics, and is accountable for the lab's performance to the Department of Energy. Fermilab is home to the Department of Energy Superconducting Quantum Materials and Systems Center, which is one of 5 of the Department of Energy National Quantum Institutes. It is also a participant in the Oak Ridge-led initiative and is studying algorithms and theoretical approaches for high-energy physics, is conducting experiments that rely on quantum information science and technology, and is developing quantum networks. Leah holds a personal interest in quantum information science and technology as applied to scientific discovery, and in particular to the use of quantum sensors for dark matter searches. So I would like to start our discussion this morning with a few questions and then invite the audience to raise your hands, take the microphone, and state your question. And so for now, I challenge the audience to start thinking about questions that are succinct and end with a question mark. I will attempt to model this behavior. So first, I would like to ask our panel, how do you see your institution's history and capacity feeding into this regional quantum ecosystem?
Okay, let me jump in first, and then we'll go along here. So first of all, it's wonderful to be here with you, and I think we all have a sense of this moment as being one that's particularly exciting for quantum information science and technology. It's this moment of really complex, it's an exciting transition time from early discovery into really starting to imagine what the translation looks like. And as you described, Jonathan, all of these societal networks coming together to make it happen. I mean, that's a rare moment, so it's very exciting. I do want to start by saying, to my mind, for the University of Chicago, this is really one of the most important things we're involved in as an institution. And it's because it brings together what I consider to be kind of the essential elements of what a great university should be trying to do. All the time we are thinking about how can we be helping to shape and define new fields of knowledge? Where is that going to happen? How can we be a part of renewing and constantly creating transformative education for the students who are here? And also very much a mindset of engagement and thinking about how can what happens here at the university connect with what's happening in societal needs and help support important things that need to happen for our society. And I just see all 3 of those converging so perfectly in this area that it's a natural focal point for us. And certainly we have invested very substantially over a decade in this field, and that has led to the creation of a very intense, strong community of scientists, faculty, students, engineers who are thinking together with a very collaborative spirit I mentioned a little bit briefly in the introduction this morning how I can feel that because my new laboratories are really in very close proximity to where all this is going on, and the energy level that comes from that part of the, that part of the campus is just, it's palpable. So we're going to get drawn in and start some new projects there. So we see this as an area where over time, and we can say more about this as we go through, over time the university will be both continuing to invest in new faculty as well as exploring how we can make sure that we're creating the fundamental infrastructure and capacity that's needed to be able to be working well. And certainly we now have, I think it's the first, or at least it's certainly one of the first doctoral programs that's in this area. David's nodding yes, so we'll claim it. So, that's new activities in the education space. But especially what I want to call out is how much from the get-go, from the very beginning, the university has had a mindset of partnership around this. So we're here with our colleague institutions that are partners, as well as so many of you that come from the private sector and from government that are thinking about this. And it's something that's been woven into this from the beginning and that we are going to be talking about in the panel.
Thanks. Yeah, as a national lab, Argonne has, two areas that I'd like to note that can be particularly useful for quantum information science and technology. The first is that it houses large experimental capabilities with professional scientists. And these capabilities are going to be needed, and these are not the kind of capabilities that, say, industry or academia can typically have. Right? A few examples are, for instance, the advanced photon source. It has 7,000 worldwide users. Argonne is one of the 2 Department of Energy flagship computing centers. There is an exascale machine that is going to be actually delivered by Intel very shortly. And then there is QNext, the DOE-led large national center for quantum research. It is one of only a handful of such centers throughout the US. And at Argonne, we started investing in quantum about 7 years back. And this is a key strategy of the lab. QNext has grown enormously. As part of it, there is the quantum foundry that has just taken ownership of the building that's been prepared for it. And we anticipate that it will be one of the first, probably the first foundry that will serve the quantum research community as a whole. So there's clearly, it has the kind of facilities that are going to be needed going forward. The second thing I'll point out is that Argonne is traditionally, going back from the time where it developed nuclear technology in the 1940s, has this capability of doing large projects under one roof. And we see this happening in quantum, possibly, going forward, right? And you can think of it as a disprejudiced, sort of neutral watering hole that brings academia, industry, and national labs together. Does not have the vested interests of, say, businesses, does not have often the sort of short-term cycles of universities. These are labs that are going to be there. These are professional staff that are going to be there. So that's another big advantage. I see kind of these national labs as being a glue for the entire community. And that's been the model with which we've been working at QNext, for instance. Thanks. To you.
Thank you. Well, let me start by saying, what time is it? Good morning. It's my great pleasure to be here. Let me start by saying, first of all, this is truly a momentous occasion and a historic moment for my university, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and I think most of you know it is the largest university in the state of Illinois. It's the flagship university of the 3 constituent campus system of the University of Illinois system. We've been around for about 155 years. We're one of the 34 original land-grant universities that was founded to educate the masses and to do the public good. through research and innovation. So from many, many perspectives, this quantum partnership that we have with the University of Chicago and others is in the sweet spot of what I call the land-grant university for the 21st century, where we are no longer just focusing on some people perceive us to be mostly focuses on ag and food production. We do that, but we do a lot more. We have a world-class College of Engineering, the Granger College of Engineering, that I think all of you would agree has really done an amazing job in innovating across that 155-year history. And really, we have a national and an international reputation for being the go-to place for engineering and engineering-related innovation. And so when this was first brushed with me by your former president about a couple of 3 years ago, the notion of coming together to really seamlessly, strategically partner together so that we could leverage all of our resources to really create an ecosystem here in the city of Chicago and in this Midwest region that will be second to none in this whole big idea of quantum computing, quantum sensing, networking. And we have a lot of capacity in that regard. As was mentioned, we have this entity called iQuest, which is our own version of how we are rallying our faculty members across probably 8 different academic units. And this really does fit into how the university is structured. We're known for the fact that we have 16 colleges, but we also have 10 interdisciplinary institutes that I call the connective tissues across those collegiate units. And we also have a reputation to fundamentally understanding that most of the complex issues we face as a society, and I believe this fully, it's very difficult for one university, one department, or one academic unit to solve these grand challenges. So this partnership with the University of Chicago and Fermi and Argonne and the other partners, to me, is really in the sweet spot of what we do very well. And that is, how do you form the partnership? How do you leverage the strength of every partner to find the best and I think the fastest solution to a complex issue? So we're very, very proud to be here today, and I want to just emphasize on the front end, I'm the only person that's sitting on this, I guess it's not a stage, that's sitting out in front of you that's not trained in physics or chemistry. I do have a degree in plant physiology, so if you want to ask me any plant physiology questions, I'll be first to respond. But I'm very happy to talk more about what this means from my position as a leader. I think of one of the finest public universities in the country and what this could mean for the whole issue of quantum computing. I believe that the future of quantum computing is going to run squarely through the university and the laboratories you see partnered here, and it's going to run squarely through the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago. And we are very, very humbled to be part of this partnership and to leverage our expertise, not only in just doing the research, but as Paul said, how do we translate that research into new business opportunities? And I'll talk a little bit maybe later about our research part, but more specifically, how this work is not about developing the scientific, the technological piece. It's about how this can transform society, and particularly the south side of Chicago that this university has been part of for a very, very long time. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you today.
Wow, hard to follow this. So good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers very much for inviting me to participate in this panel. I'm honored. As Paul and others said, I really feel strongly we are at the cusp of a revolution here. And I am very excited for us to lead this revolution together with our regional partners that all are represented here and many more in the audience. I feel strongly we need to come together and just make Chicagoland one of these centers in the US and around the world in quantum information science and technology. To come now back to John's question about what I feel Fermilab brings to this. So I'd like to start by reminding you that Fermilab is America's particle physics and accelerator laboratory. To deliver on this mission, we rely on 4 core capabilities: particle physics, accelerators, detectors, scientific computing, and data. Now, because the HEP mission poses very challenging, increasingly challenging questions, we have to develop technologies that are really go beyond state of the art on all these 4 capabilities in order to support the capabilities, in order to support our core mission. It turns out each one of these capabilities are really, and technologies, really are enabling technologies for QED-C. And let me go through to draw the analogy on 5 elements. First, on accelerators. We are building at Fermilab a world-leading superconducting radio frequency particle accelerator, and we're utilizing world-class quality factor SRF resonators for this accelerator. It turns out these, and cryogenics, of course, that are also state-of-the-art. It turns out these resonators are really the fundamental element of our quantum NQI SQMS center, is the fundamental piece and technology around which SQMS is built about, as well as cryogenics. Then, on detectors, in order to deliver on the ever-challenging detector requirements, we need to develop very fast control electronics, microelectronics with readouts, with co-design, and capable to also operate in cryogenic environments. For DUNE, our flagship neutrino experiment, we have to develop microelectronics that are embedded in 70 degrees Kelvin. The liquid argon is what the DUNE detector has. So we take this technology and expand it now and translate it down to 4 degrees Kelvin, and we have detectors that can be used as quantum sensors. So go down now to algorithms and simulations. Of course, we're in the business for high-energy physics to develop state-of-the-art algorithms in order to simulate HEP, fundamental physics problems. And so now then we can use this expertise to develop algorithms that can be operated, that can be deployed on quantum computers to solve not only fundamental high-energy physics problems or condensed matter physics or other fundamental science, but also to really mine very heavy experimental data that come from the detectors in particle physics that are being used. And next topic is systems integration and engineering. Of course, we put large detectors, accelerators, and as Supratik said, national laboratories were very good at doing things at scale. And so the expertise on systems engineering and integration are invaluable as we design quantum networks, for example, with the ultimate goal of quantum internet. And last but not least, workforce development and pipeline. We have such a strong and tremendous program to educate students at all levels, from high school to college, undergraduate and graduate, and postdocs. We have numerous internships, fellowships, co-op. We have world-class scientists and engineers to work with them. We have the facilities and the laboratories for them to acquire expertise and experience, knowledge and training, and of course we have a 4,000 member user base among a lot of US universities and across the globe. And so all of this system and framework we can apply to train the next generation of QED-C workforce and to train them and educate them. So I'd like to stop here.
Wow. Thank you for this overview and context. I'd like to ask, what additional role may your research institution play in commercialization as quantum technologies are reduced to practice and scaled?
We'll probably just keep going down the row here. So let me start with saying, for this, what we want to get to is thinking about what's going to be happening in the next 5 and 10 years. But I do want to just take a moment and just take a little bit of stock of where we are. So I think it's really interesting to think about the sequence of investments and how they've played out. So at least, here we've made locally an investment that really started with new faculty in molecular engineering. And then that's grown out to include now more in computer science, chemistry, physics, astronomy, and astrophysics. I'm sure the next time we'll be here, we'll also be saying a substantial number in the biological sciences. So, it's growing out in that sense. And that initial investment on our part then has been really augmented by the government investments. You heard some of the large centers that the Department of Energy has put here, large investments from the NSF as well, with one of the Quantum Leap Challenge Institutes in quantum architectures and networks, and a very significant investment in quantum sensing for biophysics and bioengineering. So that kind of creates the first step. And the thing that I see happening now is with the formation of Duality, the first accelerator exclusively focused on quantum companies. There are now 11 companies that are coming through, and Supratik, I think you're one of them. Yes, you're a founder of one of them, MEMQ, building technology to enable quantum internet. Okay, so between the universities, the national labs, the government investment, and now some of the startups, and of course increasingly we see the very large, corporate partners coming in to work with us, dozens now. So where do we see it going? I mean, we've already talked about the really the three big sectors, which are sensing, and in the near term, we can certainly imagine that high energy physics and biological imaging will be, a couple of examples, but there will be many more. Likewise, networks and communication. We can see that growing out very substantially in the next few years. And of course, computing, perhaps the hardest one, but nonetheless, you can see the early stages of that materializing. And I think that what we'll see in the next few years within the exchange here is really trying to lock down on what the goals are going to be for the community. You said there's a road mapping exercise going on. And I think that's where we're headed now, is a realization that there's enough control there of all of the components that we can see that we're at that threshold where real actual impacts on first levels of technology will be there, whether it's in the financial sector and networking, whether it's in areas like the high energy physics. I want to take one moment just to say one thing, to think about one thing about what Leo was saying a moment ago about the development at Fermi, and just to kind of get a sense of how these things can sometimes play out. She told the story of how we've got now these the history of building ever more powerful accelerators, and the fundamental component of that being the superconducting RF cavity. Who could have imagined that creating that technology would then play a role in creating some of the highest qubits ever? And yet here you can see how a technology created for one purpose. And so what I see here within the exchange is this convergence of many different capacities that are all interacting with each other to create the ability to make innovations like that that are very substantial. Anyway, my view is that within a few years, we're going to have really clear roadmaps around these issues of what sensing, networks and communications and early stages of computing can do. And those are the things that we'll start to see emerging. And this kind of networking that we have going on here today is like a fundamental step in getting that to happen.
Thanks. So adding to what Paul said, I think if you look at whenever there is a brand new technology that's come in and it's changed the way we live or work, or it's really impacted our lives in a major way, more often than not, the startups or collections of startups have played a dominant or very important role in that, right? So I think any commercialization effort that we do here has to kind of bake that in addition to being able to work with large companies, that we also have an ecosystem that is also encourages this startup ecosystem. And this is what we're doing, right? You can see the participation of companies just in this meeting that to me tells us that we're on our way in this direction. But we need to ensure that this happens, right? Of course, we can improve ourselves, be a bit more nimble. National labs can work on shortening those timescales. But that, in the 7 years that I've been here, this is already happening. And I think I can say that in an honest way. The other piece, I think, is part of our responsibility also is that today we believe that the impact for quantum computing is going to be in sensing, communications, or computing. My own take is, and I agree with one of the comments earlier in the morning, that sensing and I think communications will be the two big areas where products will emerge first, right? Yeah. That are going to be significantly useful to the public good. But again, like Paul pointed out many times, we don't know the impact of something we're developing. So we have to keep that door open, the yet new application that we have absolutely no idea about, right? And that's kind of the responsibility of academia and the national labs to make sure that that door remains open as we delve into commercialization for the future. Can't get locked in too much. So, thanks.
Yes. Well, for University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, we, as I said earlier, we are very, very blessed to have an infrastructure that support taking big innovative ideas like this and nurturing those ideas with two outcomes in mind. One is to hopefully lead to the creation of small businesses and startups that can go out and really help drive the economic vitality of the state. And we're very much committed to working with you. And one of the reasons we're so excited about this is just not the technology and innovation piece, it's the new businesses and the new technology is going to drive different kinds of jobs and new workforce opportunities. And so we're very, very excited about that piece. And that is part of our strategy for creating what is called iQuest at the university. And part of that is linked to a $200 million partnership with IBM, which is a very, very critically important corporate partner for us. And that's going to provide the resources in order for us to really leverage the fact that we have 60+ people from across multiple disciplines working in this space. And as I mentioned, we have a research park that has 126 companies or businesses that are located there, and we're in the process of building out an incubator space to be able to advance some of those businesses once they reach maturity, but making sure they stay in the state of Illinois to add to the economic vitality. So I think this is what a public university is supposed to do, and we think we have the infrastructure and the sense of working in with partnerships to make this happen. The other piece that I think is critically important is not just what my colleagues tell me is that the sensing component of this is probably going to be the space in which a lot of these new startups and businesses will come. But also, there's the other piece of this that I think we have to pay attention to, and that is to make sure that as we create these new innovations that leads to small and larger sized businesses, that we're also making sure we're not leaving, as we've had a tendency to do for far too long in this country, whole segments of our society behind. We have to work as diligently toward making sure that underrepresented groups, underrepresented part of our society, or have a fair opportunity to participate in this new ecosystem. And this inclusive innovation network that we're working very closely with the University of Chicago on is that our public engagement people have been working on this for almost 2 or 3 years now. And the more I hear about it, the more I get excited, because that is truly is what is going to bring about, from my perspective, the collective impact that we seek from this new level of innovation that's different from anything that's ever been done before. And it has to be thought about in its broadest context to have the broadest impact on society, not just creating a new company that's going to enrich those that are already wealthy. We got to think about the collective impact and the societal impact, and not miss the real opportunity to make sure that this is done differently. And it has to start at K through 12. One of the things we're doing, we're very proud of, is that we've brought a bunch of K through 12 educators to Champaign and started talking to them about computer science in general. And we're very glad to be part of an effort that hopefully will be infusing computer science education across all of K through 12 education across this state. That's the critical first step. The innovations will surely come out of this, but what is the collective impact on broader society?
And I'd like to really pick up on this thread around the Inclusive Innovation Network. And I'd like to hear from the other panelists on what role you and your institutions may play to increase the talent pipeline, in particular among underrepresented groups.
Look, I think this is, as Bob was just saying, I think this has to be one of the key pieces of what we try to do together here and what we can do together. And it has many elements to it. So obviously there's a piece that can relate to the development of workforce. It's quite possible that amongst the startups and the others that we see here, that the early phase will be around, let's say, equipment development for the underlying technology that can feed the industry, as well as early stages of creating tools for simulation and other things of those kinds that will lead to, and those are areas where we can work together now to try to prepare an educated workforce that can be part of this. So we now have a memorandum of understanding with the local area community colleges that enable us to create some joint curriculum, and there can be some things that we could do together to help sponsor that workforce development. We have partnerships with some of the other educational institutions. Obviously, we're in a very deep partnership with everybody who's here, especially, Bob's referred to how deeply the UIUC Chicago partnership is in this area, but I want to call out also some of the other educational institutions that are nearby that can play a big role in this, and I'll especially call out Chicago State, IIT and UIC as being institutions that we can collaborate with and are collaborating with in order to expand the opportunities there. So those are a few examples of some of the things that we can do in the inclusive innovation space, and to try to make sure that this area is one where, as a new technology develops, it is indeed something that connects with helping to bring an area that's been so disadvantaged for so long in the south side of Chicago, to bring the community into participation in it.
Leah?
Yes, I'd like to point out that one of the first initiatives of our SQMS Center was to establish the Parker Fellowship that was targeted for underrepresented populations of our community, with the goal to attract and bring to Fermilab a fellow to work within the SQMS Center and learn quantum information science and technology. And in addition, at Fermilab, we have several other, in some sense, we were inspired, I would say, from SQMS, and we established then several other fellowships that target college students and master's students, primarily from underrepresented populations. I should say exclusively for several of them. And we bring them in as interns to teach them and train them in skills that are difficult to find out and hire. For example, accelerator engineering, or which are disciplines very relevant for quantum systems as well. And so by establishing those internships and programs, we tackle two problems. One is to create a workforce pipeline in some difficult to hire disciplines, but essential for QAS systems. And second, in diversifying our workforce. So the vision and the dream is our next generation workforce is going to be mostly comprised of underrepresented populations. On top of that is part of my personal vision as the new director of the laboratory to work with neighboring regional universities and increase the number of students that come to Fermilab and do their training and their thesis work, undergraduate or graduate, master's or PhD thesis work. And I'm very excited about that.
I would like to take an opportunity to engage the audience. If you raise your hand with any questions, we'd be happy to take them. We have a microphone, please.
When it comes to developing the talent pipeline, how do you address, given the security implications of quantum information science, how do you address brilliant students from like China or like Russia or Iran who want to study in, you want to study quantum information science and work in the US?
Well, let me start by saying that we, here at the university, we are a place that's built on being open. I mean, the whole place, that's what it leverages off of. And so we are a place where, the ability of students to come from all backgrounds and all over the world is an essential piece of what we do. And we do have a remarkable group of students that come to us from all around the world and are able to work and collaborate together. I think some of the issues that are there around the geopolitical competitiveness issues will show up in areas like as we move into some of the companies, issues around export control, issues of those kind. And I think those are, I mean, to be honest with you, in many ways handled in other sectors of this network that we're talking about here, and we try to be really strong partners around that to help. So you may encounter it more at the, in your world, Supratik or Leah, or some of the companies here may be more expert in how to do that than we are. But I will say that I do think we will make the greatest progress on this when we have the most open approach to it, and where our thinking is on how to be the place where open sharing of information leads to the most rapid creation of new knowledge, as opposed to trying to hold it back.
And I would just add that, as a public university, with all the attributes of being a public university and our commitment to providing open education. And I think most of you know University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign has one of the largest international student population, specifically from China, than most universities in this country. And what we've been working on is how do we sustain those numbers, but at the same time, how do we get back to the good old days where we open our doors to the best and the brightest from around the world, and then created a very clear mechanism for them to stay in this country and to add to the innovation that's necessary to move us forward. And every time I'm in Washington, D.C., every time that Paul and I were at an AAU meeting, it's a big topic of conversation, and all the trips that we've made to different federal agencies to try to drive that message home. And that has to be the message that we are who we are as a nation, largely because of our policies and openness in science, openness to our universities. And I can tell you, we're at a critical juncture. Yeah, we have to be smart, but at the same time, we cannot back away from that core principle. Otherwise, we will be less than what we've been over the previous parts of our history, from my perspective.
And I would add that there's a large body of research and policy around fundamental research and national security that I'd be happy to talk your ear off at the break. Other questions from the audience? Hands, please. I see a hand.
Hello, thank you. So I guess my question comes from speaking to a lot of undergraduate students and graduate students who I think don't think they have what it takes to learn quantum, who think, oh, I can't be a quantum physicist. I don't have that kind of skill set. And so I guess besides the programs that are being set up to welcome people who would like to learn, what sort of effective outreach has been done to make people aware that you don't necessarily need to spend all your years studying specific, perhaps esoteric areas of quantum physics to make a difference in this field? What has that effective outreach either looked like, or what should, in your opinion, should it look like?
I think I can make a very quick comment here. You know, what you're saying is very relevant, right? And it's a mutual thing. I strongly believe that for quantum information science to progress, turn into a technology, it needs to become multidisciplinary. So it needs material scientists, computer scientists, mechanical engineers, packaging engineers, EEs. And we are working towards it. Whenever something transitions from, it was mostly a physics subject, but there is a broad awareness that this needs to turn into a technology. This is happening. There are more students joining. We get tremendous enthusiasm from undergraduates who want to join the quantum programs. In fact, I would say, the best students want to come here. And they're coming from different areas. But I think the multidisciplinary aspect of this is the piece that we need to grow out, particularly in encouraging undergrads.
Maybe if I could add to that, Supratik, a couple of things here. I mean, for example, as you mentioned it, I really do think that within not such a long period of time, we'll have examples of really interesting kinds of biological imaging, and there'll be a whole community in that world that's going to be using these things. I want to also throw it back a little bit to the group that's here and say that I feel that when a field of knowledge has really achieved a breakthrough, as is really happening here, Nobel Prize announcement this year in physics, really, to my mind, says, okay, something's really happened here that sets a threshold that's really astonishing. I think, one of the tests for us is in fact to be able to provide very simple language that describes what's going on, that people can use. Yes, there are very complex concepts, but actually in some ways also the ideas are ones that can be expressed in simple language in ways that people can grasp, some of whom may need to delve into the underlying pieces to great details. Some people may need a level of information that allows them to participate in other ways. So I think it is a really an important thing for this field to as a whole, to grapple with how to provide good ways of talking about this that aren't just, oh, it's very complicated and it will be important. And I think that's happening. I really do. So thank you for raising the point, and I'll try to press locally here as well to find out more about how we can do better at it.
If I may add a bit to that, I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier. We really do have to think about quantum, you know, from a downstream and an upstream perspective. And what I mean by upstream is we can't really expect students to flock to this door, this new opportunity, unless there is a strategic plan about how do you get more young people through K through 12 and their families and their organizations that they are part of to understand the opportunities that exist. And one of the entities that I'm glad to serve on that board is the 4-H Council. Now, 4-H is not just a rural entity, it's an urban entity, it's now as much as rural. How do you start to use these established networks to start to get families and young people to see the possibilities in quantum? And then you follow through with that, as I said earlier, about workforce development and making sure that that is a strategy as well. And we have to be intentional about this because it's not going to happen on its own. And I can tell you, we are absolutely committed to doing all we can through the K through 12 work, and QSTEAM is another initiative that, and I just met someone from that entity when I walked in today. So there's a lot we're doing in that space, but I submit to you, we really do have to do more. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in the same situation we have now, where, for example, I'm constantly called upon to solve the underrepresentation of students at my university from the city of Chicago. Nobody wants to talk. I'm a downstream part of it. I'm downstream, and I acknowledge that. And we all do what we can to influence upstream, but you've got to start upstream with this if you don't want to find yourself in the next 10 years, 20 years in the same predicament that we're in today.
And I look forward to meeting our influencers here who may be taking a disruptive approach to getting the message out. I want to take the prerogative to end with a brief question. I'd like to hear one idea from any of you around how your organization might work together within this ecosystem to strengthen the region that you've encountered through our discussion today.
Well, one of the things I didn't get a chance to mention, and I think this is one of the ways that we can work together, not only on the front end of the research and innovation, developing the technology, whether it's on the sensing side or the quantum computing side, but really, ultimately, I think we all would agree, this is going to lead to a whole new type of skilled individuals who are going to be needed not only to continue the innovation and to drive the workforce. And one of the things that we're trying to figure out, not only around quantum, but quantum is a big one, is how do we prepare ourselves to think strategically and intentionally about how do we continue to educate that workforce that's going to come out of this whole quantum ecosystem? How do we think intentionally about doing the upskilling and the reskilling? And for me, as the Chancellor of Urbana, I can tell you, some people look at me a little oddly when they when I start talking about upskilling and reskilling, they immediately go to, well, you're not a technical college, why are you doing this? And I submit it's just the opposite. It is part of my responsibility as land-grant university to think about how you continue to educate the masses. And whether you like it or not, the masses is going to include people that may not have a 4-year degree. And these new jobs are probably not going to, some of them, not going to require a 4-year degree. So the challenge we have is how do we rethink what it means for universities to be engaged in education and workforce development. It's going to require us to think differently, I believe. about what we should be doing in upskilling and reskilling, and how do we create the partners across universities and with the private sector to do that at scale and to do it extremely well.
Yeah.
So my idea to strengthen the region is to strengthen our partnership, our regional partnerships, and work together with all the institutions and with Argonne, our sister laboratory, and all the universities and the centers on quantum computers, on networks, on sensors, and above all, of course, on the new generation of quantum scientists and engineers. And I'm very much committed, and I'm very much looking forward to doing that.
That's a fantastic closing thought. Please join me in thanking our panelists.